introduce you to the first speaker. And that is someone who I admire very much. He lives right behind 13 Sisters, right in Mountain Ranch. And he raises animals for food, to take care of his land, and to take care of him. And he offers so much to the community and makes amazing friendships that I can see with so many different people. Jay McBride, everybody, talking about land and animals and stewardship.
I think I got this one, or do I use
good.
this?
Yep, you're good on that one.
Okay.
Or you do both.
Do both? Really?
Both.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Seed Exchange, thank you for having me. Joy, Jay, love you guys. Appreciate you guys being here, everybody. Thank you very much. I'm Jay McBride. I moved here probably late 2019. Can you hear me now? Okay. I moved here late 2019, and I moved at the edge of one of the burn scars from the Butte fire. And I had to deal a lot with basically when they came and they dropped the trees. I had debris everywhere. You couldn't walk through my pasture. I didn't really even have a pasture. I had star thistle. So, oh my goodness. So I had star thistle in my pastures, and I could not find a way to get rid of them. I didn't want to spray herbicide. And I thought, everybody else has animals, and tractors are really expensive. So why not let the animals do the work? I came from Sacramento. I lived right in the middle of downtown. I had 5 chickens and 2 ducks. And that's pretty unheard of in the city. Nobody really has ducks or chickens. And so I started researching, and I came across Joel Salatin, which I'm sure most of you know, who has pastured broilers out in Virginia. And he uses the broilers in a way that channels the manure and channels the bird to express what it does naturally. But it keeps them confined and safe from predators. So I went out and I bought 200 broiler birds, 200 chicks, and I brought them home. I cannot explain what 200 chicks looks like in a box. Very small, and there's a bunch of them, and you don't really expect as to how fast they are going to grow because they are fast-growing birds. So I bought electric netting to keep them in because I could not keep them in this box the entire time. So once they got fully feathered, I moved them out on the pasture because that's what I saw, that's what I knew. I'd been following Joel Salatin, Justin Rhodes. I've read so many books about pastured poultry, and I thought, this is what I want to do. And I like birds. Birds are great companions. To watch them go out and peck and look and scratch, they're actually quite entertaining to watch. So I start pasturing these birds, and I'm moving them basically 300 square feet at a time in little sections. And I started to notice something. I started noticing that, one, all the burn material was starting to come up out of the ground. And so as I was moving the birds, I would walk up and I'd pick up all these burned pieces of sticks and I'd pile them up, and I have piles across my place now that is just burned pieces of wood that were embedded into the ground that these birds scratched around and dug up. I fed them on the ground, they got earth from the ground, and I just kept moving. So then came down to where I harvested them for food. And harvesting 10 at a time, you start to notice things with the birds. And these are free range, they don't see cages, they don't have antibiotics, they don't have medicated food. 20% of their diet comes from grass, the bugs in the grass and in the soil, and then obviously the organic feed, which I get from Modesto Milling, by the way. It's all organic, it's good stuff. And I've put organic feed side by side, and the chickens will decide which one they like. And so far, for broilers, Modesto Milling has a great ratio for their feed. So I enjoy buying from a local company that can produce feed on a level where it can be used to raise your animals for food, and you don't have to worry that it's coming from Paraguay or Russia or wherever it may come from, because they will do that. They'll bring food in from outside. When the chickens are on pasture, you can see the effect of the different types of food on the grass. Sometimes the manure will clump up and just sit on the surface of the soil. Sometimes it will get spread out and washed into the soil. And it doesn't even look like they've been there other than the fact that they've scratched away. One second.
Emergency announcement. We have a little boy, a toddler, outside right now with one of the peace officers. He's got a green and blue shirt, and he can't find his parents, and neither can we. So I'm wondering if anybody could even just take a look out there to see if they know who that little boy is. Thank you.
All else we can post them on Strictly Mountain Ranch Animals. Okay, where was it? Food. Yeah, so you could see the different effects of the food on the land. Some food would sit on the surface, some food would just disintegrate and go right into the soil. As I started doing different batches and trying different feeds, I realized that there is a feed conversion ratio, which is basically how they convert feed into muscle mass. I've had them in a confinement situation before, not the particular pasture birds, but another batch. I held them in a confinement situation just as an experiment to see what the feed conversion ratio would do versus a bird that sits on grass and is supplemented with feed from a mill, or a bird that is held in confinement and strictly fed that feed. I found a couple different things. Health. The health of the bird. When you hold them in confinement and they don't get to go out and get grass, they've always had sunlight, but they never got to go into different paddocks. So they stayed in the one paddock, they got conventional feed, and they didn't get as big, they didn't fill out like they were supposed to. I used a method which is basically a bedding method where they go out and they manure over a yard, and then you bring in bedding and you cover over the top of that, repeat layer after layer after layer, and that basically makes a bed that is going to be composting. So for the winter, that will generate heat. It will keep them warm if it's covered. You don't really have to worry too much about the snow because they are a little cold hardy, but that deep bedding keeps the manure away from the surface. There's nothing like a chicken that is on pasture. The confinement birds grew well. They didn't fill out as much as the pasture. The pastures took a little bit longer because the food is a little bit more spread out. They're not just eating and eating and eating. But the texture of the meat, the tenderness, the fat that was in the body, the way the organs were, the color. I didn't have any scientific tests done, but I can guarantee you between a confinement bird and a bird that is ran on pasture, it is much more palatable. It has a bite to it, the one that's on pasture. The one that's raised with conventional feed is like you're just eating. It's just like chicken from the store. You pop the whole drumstick in your mouth and out it comes with just the stick. This is basically like going out and getting a bird on your land that you've had to hunt. That's what type of texture it has. So if you had to ever go get a wild turkey before, or you've ever eaten quail, very similar. So with all these chickens, I thought, this is a lot of work. There's 200 of them, and I've got 2 different nets, 100 per, and I'm moving them once, sometimes twice a day. And I thought, I gotta be able to do this greater. So I started moving sheep. I bought 5 sheep, and I put them in a 10 by 10 cage, and move them once or twice a day. And the land changed. It went from rough and rocky to very smooth. Everything that I had picked up, all the wood, the big large pieces that had come down from these cedar trees that weren't deteriorating, some of the Doug firs that they cut down and just left have these huge branches that were buried at least 6 inches deep. And so I had all this wood left over, and I thought, I need a better way to do this. It didn't require so much labor. So the sheep were the way to do that. And after all the running of the sheep, I moved them manually every day in this pen, which is quite a lot of work. And I think that's really the one thing about stewarding the animals is that it's not easy. Don't ever let them make you think it's easy. It looks easy on the videos and on paper it looks really nice, but it's a lot of work. And like Sam said, food is not a big profit area right now. And so really what you're doing is you're trying to feed each other. And that's really, I think, the goal is you're not here to make money as a farmer, you're just trying to feed each other. And I know I can't do that. But I enjoy the work. I would rather do this than work a 9 to 5 at what I was doing, driving around for 6 hours in the Bay Area, you know? The quality of life from just being out in the field, the sunlight, moving these animals around, whatever you use, whether it be sheep, whether it be chickens, whether it be cattle. I just bought my first steer this year, and so to see the different ways that the animals affect the land. The pigs, I have cooney pigs, and those pigs don't burrow, they don't plow, they just rough things up. And so having pigs in a pen, I wanted to plant more things. I thought, this is great. I can use the pigs to tear the land up. I'll come up and backseed it and repeat and repeat. And then pretty soon you don't even have to worry about pasture. You have the food. It's being grown for your livestock. You don't have to worry about which pasture am I going to move them to get big on, because you're slowly improving your pasture as you go. You don't need to do it all at once. You don't need to dive in 100%. If you don't have 10 acres, if you don't have 100, you can do it small. The whole point in being is that you do it in a way that generates food for you. It's healthy food, nutrient-dense food. You're not getting that from the store. None of that boxed, dried anything is giving you the nutrients you're going to get by growing your own food, which is why I love this seed and scion exchange. And I didn't even know anything about the scion exchange until I met Sam. And she said, yeah, we're doing all these wooded things, and we're cutting all these things, and then you can graft them onto your trees, and then you can grow whatever you want, you know, right off of your same rootstock. That's great. So that really opened my eyes to utilizing different parts of my land for the animals. So using a forested area for the pigs, and have the pigs come in and cut the underbrush, right? And then the chickens, use the chickens to come in and rake out the fine details. The whole point is you're not running fuel, and you're not running a tractor, you're not out there 9 hours a day. You put your animals in the spot, sprinkle some food out, let them go to work. You're done. And that's what I really like, because I can't afford a plow. I can't afford a big old huge fancy tractor, as a farmer anyways. So it's like, how do we make the land and the animals work together in a way that it cut costs? Your food, the doctor bill, because you're eating good food. You feed your neighbors. That makes community. You start trading with your neighbors. Say, I got this, I got this, I got this. And pretty soon you just keep repeating every year. And here's one thing that I really like is one pasture I had those little stickers with the curly cues, and they get in everything, and you can't get them out. You got to take your socks off and flip them inside. Having the chickens and the sheep run one after the other, gone. Star thistle I had knee high. Couldn't walk through my place. I ran chickens, I ran sheep, 2 years, gone. Now they come by and they get the little tendrils that come out off the ground, right? I remember standing in the middle of my field one year, and I had just bought this brand new weed eater. And I'm out there whizzing down these stickers, and I'm going to get every single one of them. I didn't even get a quarter of the way through. And I thought, I'm done. I can't. It's 102 outside, and I'm in the middle of no shade. I'm finished. My place will burn down. I don't care. So yeah, utilize animals in a way that you don't have to do the work. I was following my steer the other day, and I was getting him back onto my property. I don't have any fencing. My fence is all burned down in the deep fire. So basically, I just try to keep my animals close in a pen until they realize this is where the feed comes from, right? We try to keep them close. And then we let them out, and they always come back. Most of the time, a lizard predator gets them, and that happens as well too. But watching the steer As he's walking through the pasture, he's depressing the soil. He's making an indentation in it. And he's 1,000 pounds making indentations in it. So he's literally churning the earth as he's walking. So if you do this 2 or 3 times, he creates this path of indentation. And so there's a way that you can use these animals to not only plow your field, but to plant new fields, to eliminate fertilizer inputs. You don't have to go buy chemical fertilizers anymore because you're running the animals across it. And what's better than having an animal recycle green waste that it eats right off the ground, turns over and over. It's a closed loop system. What grass goes in, it comes out. Excuse my language. But it's a constant cycle. When they get to maturity, they either go to freezer camp, sell them to the auction, whatever you want, you know. But the whole point being is that they're doing something the entire time you have them. They're not just in a confinement space, standing there in their own excrement, doing nothing, not benefiting your land, your soil, or anything. Let them go. Let them walk around. Let them follow you. Get a grain bucket and walk around shaking the bucket. You know, let them do their thing on the land. Let them express what they want to do. And you'll find that it's no work at all. It's actually entertaining to sit and just go, here's 10 acres, let's go see what you do with it. Granted, the pigs, you gotta chase down. The steer, you gotta chase down. 13 sisters, I think I know everybody over there because I'm constantly getting my animals from their spot. I don't know what they got going on over there, but all my animals end up over there at one point or another. So, besides the weeds, eliminating some noxious species, there's also pest management. If you're running beef and you're running sheep, obviously you got to deal with worms, you got to deal with viruses, things like that. There was a college that did a study on following sheep and following beef with chickens. And the neat thing about that is that they're dead-end hosts for each other. So as you run your pasture with beef or with sheep, you follow it with chickens. And they'll come in and they'll peck around and they want to get on every little piece of manure pile. And when they do that, what happens is the flies come in and lay their eggs in the manure pile. There's larvae that develop. The chickens come in and scratch it all out, which distributes it. And then they eat the worms right out of it. Pest management, just for the flies. It's just for the flies. On top of that, they make great, tasty eggs off of that, which we all know are $1 bazillion a dozen. Ticks. I have 6 dogs, and they like to run. I've posted many times on Facebook where they take a quick 7-mile jump in about 4 minutes, and I gotta go chase them down, which thank goodness they haven't done that in a while. But ticks are a big problem up here. Everybody's dogs, all the livestock dogs, you're paying money to treat the dogs for the tick and the flea stuff. Chickens, guinea fowl, turkeys will eat ticks like mad. As long as I keep my dogs within my realm of my property and they don't go to the edges where I haven't been to yet, no problems with ticks. My girlfriend will take my dogs and take them to her house. The dogs go run around in her fields, come back, ticks. So definitely, if you guys do not like ticks, they will do a number on them. And I haven't really had to deal with it in quite some time unless the girl takes them over to her house. So they stay at my place most of the time. But I think really, just besides creating nutrient-dense food for your neighbors, the benefits of the manure on the land and moving it in a strategic way where it does not pile up is essential to soil health. Chicken manure is one of the most balanced manures across the board that you can get because it contains everything. It contains phosphorus, it contains potassium, it contains molybdenum, it contains nitrogen. I mean, if you look at it, it goes across the board. So it's really great for grass. And if you're trying to grow grass in a field for livestock feed or what have you, that's really what you want to try to concentrate on doing. And I'm a big stickler on things doing. They got to have a job. If they don't have a job, they go in the freezer, you know, or they go somewhere else. They go to the auction, wherever. But they have to do something for the farm because you pay a mortgage for that farm. You pay to keep these animals. You pay for their feed. So one way or another, they're gonna do their deal. So if you have, you know, soil where you're dealing with a lot of ash and a lot of carbon material, brown material on the surface, and you're worried about fire coming through, get these chickens in there, get a few of them and throw them down on the grass. Get yourself some eggs, get yourself some non-confinement free-range chicken for the freezer. If you use layer chickens at all to get your eggs, if you already have some, put those chickens close to the house. If you got a garden, put them in where the garden's gonna go. Feed them in there. Throw some wood chips in there. Throw some other stuff in there that's really gonna get them to scratch around and really turn up that soil. Let them manure in there, move them off 6 months later, plant your garden there. Start close. You don't have to put them way out in the middle of nowhere. Just make it easy on you. Don't burn fuel, don't run a tractor. The animals are good enough to do any of that. And I don't know, I'm 47 years old. I don't want to work that hard. I want the animals to do the work because I got other things they need to do. So without having fences, without having a pasture, and seeing the change, looking out at a golf course, basically, with how everything's been smoothed out for running these animals for 2 or 3 years, it's to see the change from the beginning when I came out and I could not step into my field without practically rolling on my ankle from a burned out tree or material that had been left on the ground from the disaster recovery. It amazes me to look at my property every day. Cleanup. I've never seen chickens find things like, since I've moved out here, I have found hinges, I have found car parts, I have found all these weird different things in my yard that the chickens have turned up. And I just keep using them every day. I've got them, I moved them just this morning. Another 60 birds just came from the upper pasture to the lower pasture by the house. So, one man, one person. They'll follow food, they'll make you food, they'll benefit your land, no inputs. You don't have to buy fertilizers, you don't have to go buy special soil anymore unless you really want to, you know, build extra parts of your garden. You don't have to use chemical fertilizers. And I think that's really a good thing, is because that's a lot of expense that a farmer has to incur when they're trying to grow stuff, is what they're going to use for a fertilizer, what they're going to grow their crops with, you know. You can't just flood the thing with water unless you have good soil health. And that's the most important thing when you're trying to feed yourself and grow a good garden in your front yard, you know, so you can feed your family or feed your neighbors, whatever it may be. So that's really all I gotta say. It's really easy to do. You guys can do it. You don't have to have a big old huge space. You guys can get your own eggs. You don't have to pay $8 a dozen or 10 or whatever they sell for now. You guys should feel empowered to go and grow your own food. Go for it.
Thank you, by the way, for the information. I was wondering if you've noticed a surge in like maybe native plants, like the California poppies and stuff on your pasture. And you said something about pigs that don't turn up the soil. Do you have a recommendation for sheep that are conducive, or would you just recommend any sort of market sheep?
So the pigs are cooney pigs, so their snouts are turned upward, so they can't dig. They can't really get in the ground and push around like a feeder pig would or a conventional pig. So really the only effect that they can have on because they're a pasture pig anyways, so they eat mostly grass. I think I can hold in one hand what one pig eats the entire day. So really their impact is with their hooves. It's at a downward ankle, it's sharp and pointy, and it really sets in the ground, kind of like the steer does, but just on a much more smaller scale, because they got a short wheelbase. They just, kind of like trudge along. So that action is really what's turning up the ground. Their snouts, as far as the cooney goes, their snouts aren't the ones that are really doing anything. It's them being in one spot too long and mashing the soil, like basically treading the soil with their feet. As far as sheep go, you're really not looking for anything other than stocking density. If you put one sheep in a 10 by 10 pen, it's going to take them a while to turn the soil over versus 5. So in an effort to not keep them in one spot too long, kind of doing daily moves. So whatever animals you have in the pen, they don't not stand in their own excrement. They stay there a day and then move, stay there a day and move. As far as like pigs, you're going to need to have more sheep to be able to do the same type of effect that the pigs are going to have on the soil. Thanks for that question. Appreciate that. Lauren from 13 Sisters. You kicking me out of here?
I'm not trying to kick Jay out. We're going to have plenty of time for questions for Jay a little bit later. But we're going to get Jess Bird up here. She's a local beekeeper. And I just want to thank you, Jay, for all of your information about animals and land, and look forward to hearing
Cool.
what else you have to say.
I appreciate
Let's
it.
give it up for Jay.
We have a future gardener right here also. She's
Nice.
All right, let's give it up for Jess Bird.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica, and I am one of many beekeepers in our community. I'm just a little more loud about it, I guess. And today, I want to talk to you about what we're going to be doing for the spring coming up. And we're almost there. We've got about maybe 3 weeks before we start splitting our hives that have made it through winter. And winter is probably one of the hardest times for our bees. It takes them a lot of energy to make it through. And usually beekeepers have about 60% success rate of their bees making it through the winter. And this year, with my help of my lovely partner over here, Tammy West, we have about 98% of a success rate with our bees this year making it through. We only lost one hive, and we're gonna get ready to split every single hive that we have and have 2 from 1. We might be able to do 2 splits even this year because of such a mild winter, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's kind of a luck of the draw, and you see how well your bees build and how much their population grows. And depending on our population, it takes 80,000 bees to be able to split them into 2. And from there, you want to move them, so you can't split your bees and just put them right next to each other. You have to take the nook that you just created and move it about 3 miles, at least 3 to 5 miles away, for them to be able to establish and not go back to the mother hive that you just took them from. And they will create their own queen, and they will hopefully flourish within the spring and the summer and grow into an established hive. And now you've turned 1 into 2. And that's what we're getting ready to do. I want to say less than a month we'll be ready to do that, with the weather being as bouncy as it has been. We've had a lot of good sunshine, and it all depends on your weather. So as a beekeeper, that's probably the first thing I do in the morning is check the weather. I'm looking at whether or not we're gonna have a frost in the next week or 2. If it's gonna drop below 40 degrees at night, I'm gonna leave my hives wrapped, and we've wrapped them in roofing paper this year, just to give them a little bit of insulation to get through the colder nights and the little bits of snow that we get up here in the foothills. We're really lucky with our mild weather up here. But after we take our tarps off and we split our hives, we're gonna be feeding them like crazy. And we feed a 1-to-1 sugar water in the beginning of spring. And then in the summer, as it gets a little warmer, we'll do a 2-to-1 sugar water mix. So that's 2 cups of sugar to 1 cup of water diluted, and we feed them in mason jars to the front of the hive. And that just boosts their wax building capability so that they can grow their frames out, and that's what we'll end up harvesting our honey from. They have to have that base to be able to fill it up. And we won't harvest honey until somewhere around July. But once we do, that's when we're going to announce our honey for sale, and we'll privately sell it. And we sell quart jars for somewhere around 30 bucks. And we try to not sell out. And this year we've grown to 12 hives, and we've only been harvesting from one for the past 2 years now. And so hopefully this year we have enough honey to not run out, and we'll be able to provide it for everybody in the community. And I do offer lessons, and I'm going to expand on that this year. I got myself a few kid suits, and my favorite little helper, Serafina, she's running around out here somewhere. But she goes out there and she does everything with me when it comes to the bees. It's very family friendly as long as you're protected. You want to make sure you have a full bee suit on. And last year I had my bee suit with me and I showed everybody how to put it on, and I just didn't bring it this year. It's at the farm. And we are probably, 2 days from now going to start feeding like crazy. And we do a varroa treatment because bees have this pesky little bug that likes to attach to them like a tick, and they will cling to the bee and get into the hive, and they attack the brood, which is the larva, to make more bees with. And it's probably one of our biggest battles is varroa mite and wax moths. And to battle those pests, we have to treat for the varroa mite, and we're going to use an oxalic acid fogger to do it this year. It's just safer for the bees, and it's safer for us, and it's safer for our honey as well because it doesn't stay in the hive. But it does fog out those little bugs, and they have other options like the strips. I've heard you were just getting into it. I'm sure you've heard of what are they called? I can't think of the name right now. But there's a strip that you put in there, and it's a treatment, just like any livestock has treatments for pests and little mites that we don't want hanging out with our livestock. And after we do our treatment is when we'll do our expansions. So we're getting ready for that. It's going to be a big year this year. And I don't really have a whole lot more to talk about, but I know that a lot of people have some questions for me, so I would like to open the floor for that a little bit if anybody has anything they'd like to ask me directly. Yes, do you want to come and speak up into the microphone and ask everybody your question? Oh, yes, please don't spray. Please don't spray the roadsides. We have our bees up off of Railroad Flat Road just past Jesus. We have 4 beehives there currently, and then I keep the rest of my hives down here at my property off Ponderosa Way. And we don't spray pesticides. We do have a mixture that I have written down, and I will share it with anybody that would like it. And it's dish soap, vinegar, and some warm water, and a little bit of rubbing alcohol. And it kills most bugs on your plants. I can't speak for weeds. My best suggestion for pulling weeds is just to rip them right out of the ground. Or do your chicken and sheep rotation, and that helps with goat heads even, because goat heads are so prevalent out here, and that's my biggest pain in the foot is a goat head. And yeah, what else can you think of, Tammy? Don't spray Roundup. I'm a big naysayer on Roundup. Yes.
What kind of beehive do you use?
I use a standard 10-frame Langstroth hive, and they do have 8 frames. I did see a lady over here who has a wood nook and bee frames in it that have built-out wax on them, if anybody was curious to see what those look like. It's pretty neat the way that bees are able to engineer their space around them to be as efficient as they possibly can be. But I use 10 frames. They're pretty heavy. and they're hard to lift. So if you're new into beekeeping and you do want to get into beekeeping, I do recommend 8 frames just because they're easier to lift and manage, because you are getting in there and separating the boxes from each other to do your inspections and making sure that you have your queen and that your brood is still rearing and coming in the way we'd like it to. And you gotta look at those things just to make sure that your bees are healthy. And you gotta be able to lift that sucker. So I wanna say that the average bee box for even the 8 frames can be up to 60 to 80 pounds when it's full. And the 10 frames can be over 100 pounds per box. So it can be a lot, huh? Do you have anything you'd like to add or ask? No? This is another one of our fellow beekeepers here. She's quite amazing. I have your screened bottom board for you, by the way. And I do offer my lessons. I try to incorporate them when I'm doing something that's interesting and not just an inspection. I call them my hive tours. And it can be boring if you can't find the queen, but at the same note, you're putting on the suit, you're getting the full experience of going out and looking into the beehive and just seeing how the bees interact with each other, the sound that they make, the smell of the air when you're out there with them. It kind of changes. It's a whole nother energy when you're out with a beehive. It makes you really focus on what you're doing because it can be dangerous. So you can still get stung through a suit. So we do everything we can to naturally work with our bees and not aggravate them too much. So one of my biggest sayings that I repeat to myself often is to be the tree. And I learned that from Beezar on Amazon Prime, I think is what he's on. And he has this beautiful documentary of him in Texas, just saving bees. And Texas is huge for beekeeping, and they have swarms everywhere. And this guy, Beezar, will go out and he'll catch bees that are up in the tree about 50 feet or inside of somebody's wall or whatever you got to do to get the bees to a safer place, and he'll relocate them to hit one of his farms. And I try and do this similar thing. And I've taken bees out of people's walls. I've collected them from trees. My favorite story has got to be my boyfriend Brett and we had a swarm right out in front of the apiary, the main apiary over here. And they went in the tallest part of the biggest oak tree that we had, of course, and we didn't have a ladder tall enough to get there. So we're like, okay, what do we do? Well, Brett took his dump trailer and we had some hay in the dump trailer and he lifted it all the way up and he climbed up there on top of the hay, on top of the dump trailer, and with a box, cut out a branch and shook them into the box. And then we lowered the dump trailer and got them all in the queen. Somehow we got the queen in the box. Have to get the queen for the rest of the bees to follow. And we got her and they all just started marching right into the box. And we sat there for a half hour watching these bees flying around us and finding their queen. Oh, it was nerve-wracking watching him up there on that dump trailer though. Hopefully we don't have another incident like that this year, but I'm sure we will. It's always an adventure with these bees, and we're coming up on our busy season, so we'll be out there doing our splits for our swarm control so that hopefully our hives don't swarm this year. We'll see how that goes. They are their own entity, and I don't tell them what to do. They do whatever they want. And as long as I'm on top of feeding them and making sure that they have the environment that they need to keep them as happy as I possibly can, hopefully they'll stick around and they'll live. But, you know, it's a gamble. It's a gamble. It's livestock. Bees are livestock. So it just depends on the weather more than anything. The weather and the environment that we get dealt for the season. Any other questions? Ooh, I got time to fill, don't I, Jay? Do you have any questions? When a box is full of honey, the 10 frame box, they can be over 100 pounds. A frame itself can weigh 5 pounds when it's full of honey. It can be less though too. It depends on the flow of the nectar. So our biggest nectar flow, I can't hear you, I'm sorry. Here.
Do you have different bees that you use, or do you just use the same bee for everything? Do you kind of, I know they have different types of bees. Is it just the one bee, or do you guys have multiples?
Okay. So we specifically have Italian honeybees and carnelians, and they are two different breeds, but they do the same thing. It's just like having a different breed of dog, and it works. And this year we're looking at the Russian bees because they have a higher mite resiliency than the Italians do. But the Italians and the carnelians are your honey makers. They make a lot more honey than, say, the Russian breed would. But what was your other question? Pollinators versus foragers. So, not necessarily. They all have that instinct to go out and pollinate and forage, but there are different types of bees within the colony. So you have your average worker bee, who is your female bee that you would normally see flying around, and we've got a bunch of them on the Rosemary at Big John's right now. There's a ton of honeybees. And those are our females that are foraging and pollinating. Then we'll start to see drones here soon, and those are our male bees. And they only come around in the spring and the summer when the bees are getting ready to split or create new queens. And they don't live through the winter. They don't serve a purpose in the winter, so they get kicked out of the hive. And that's kind of my sign of when I know spring is really going to be here, is when I start seeing the bees lay the drones, the male bees. And they've got their purpose. That's one of my favorite jokes. They honey nut and Cheerio. And then you've got your queen bee, who specifically is for making more bees. And that's really her only job, is to create more bees. She goes out and she mates with the drones, a bunch of different drones, and she's got all of her eggs that she'll have for her whole lifetime. And then she'll come back into the hive and she'll lay her bees. And queen bees live the longest. They'll live for 3 to 5 years if they're healthy. The rest of the bees, like the worker bees that are female, they'll live up to 35 to 45 days. And then your male bees, they die after they mate with the queen. And if they end up not mating and living through the end of the summer, they'll die just as the winter hits because they get kicked out, they get the boot, and that's just kind of their process. It's a total hierarchy when it comes to having a colony of bees. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. We wanted to have bees. My daughter had some up in China.
Yeah.
But we live in the LaGrange area. So when we bought the property, the entire driveway all the way up on both sides is full of big oleander bushes.
Yeah.
And we went online and Googled stuff, and it said on there, if you have oleander bushes, you can't have bees because you'll poison the honey. They're poisonous. And then somebody else told us, no, the oleander bushes, when they bloom the way they are, the bees don't take that and use it for their honey. They use other flowers. So
Okay.
which is true. Can they have bees or not?
Well, I'm not sure how oleanders affect honeybees. Another beekeeper may know that in the room, maybe not. But I do know that the buckeye tree is the cause of deformed wing disease with bees. So the buckeye tree is one that when it's blooming, we really push feeding them, we feed them really heavy so that hopefully they'll avoid it. Because you can't sit there and tell a bee, don't go on that buckeye tree, you know, you're gonna give yourself deformed wings. Or it would be the next generation of bees that are feeding from the pollen of the buckeye would have a deformed wing disease. So as a beekeeper, you just kind of keep an eye out on what's currently blooming or getting ready to come into bloom. And as soon as I start seeing little buds on the buckeyes, I feed the heck out of my bees. I force feed them sugar water, sugar syrup, and just kind of hope and pray.
Already got what they need.
Yes. Yeah. They'll, as long as it has pollen or nectar in it, they're gonna land on it. And they're going to try and bring it back to the hive to feed the rest of the colony. That is in their DNA. But when certain trees are in bloom, we just kind of try to avoid them, or we'll move them. If there's a big patch of buckeye trees, we'll move them far away from them, and we can bring them back after they're done blooming, so that we'll hopefully avoid buckeye pollination with our honeybees. But I know there's a few other plants, but I can't think of them at this time. Is it time for someone else? Okay. Well, thank you everyone, and I'll be here for questions.
So please welcome Jordan Lowry up here.
Thank you. Is everyone having a wonderful day today? Isn't this amazing? Last year, we did somewhat of a similar talk, and we talked about permaculture and water in the landscape. Obviously today, we're not having the same winter as we did last year. So we're going to move this a little bit more towards the diversity aspect of how permaculture can increase diversity in your community, on your landscape, and on your farms and gardens. For anyone who doesn't know, permaculture is a design science. It's a mindset and philosophy that we use to create landscapes and communities and businesses that benefit everyone. It is an ethics based, so it has 3 ethics that we are guidelining by, and that is care of the earth. So we're doing everything we can that we want that also cares for the earth. The second one is care of people. So we're doing everything we can in the way that we want that is also caring for every single person on this planet. And the third one is return of surplus. So a return of surplus to the first 2 ethics. This way, any type of surplus that we have from any of the things that we do, today everyone's returning surplus in some way, shape, or form to the first 2 ethics. So we are returning our surplus in seeds to each other. In turn, you're going to go plant those seeds and return your surplus to nature and the earth by planting them and planting your gardens. Nature is going to create a surplus for you, and it's going to return it to you in the form of vegetables and flowers, which is going to create a surplus, which you save seeds and return to people again. And this cycle of return of surplus between care of people and care of earth is a positive cycle that we can engage in to build the communities and landscapes around us. The second thing is we're guidelining by principles. A lot of principles can be thought of as ancient wisdom and techniques and mindsets. The first one is observe and interact. So when you plant your seeds, you're going to observe them sprout. You're going to see them might need water. The soil might be drying out a little bit. It might be too wet. You're going to observe and interact with that system. That's at the very basis of levels. As things grow, it's going to start giving you more interactions, and you're going to observe them and you're going to interact back with it. Maybe it's time to start flowering, so you need to give it a little bit of this, or give it a trellis, or something like that, as far as gardens go. Observe and interact also has with the landscape around you, so you're noticing when things are starting to dry out. You're noticing when things are really wet. You're noticing where it's a little shady and where it's really sunny, so that you can put things into your landscape where they need to be, so that it can be the most efficient thing for nature and the landscape. Some of the other principles that we go by is called, one of them is obtain yield. So a lot of times people think the yield from an apple tree is an apple. But the yield from an apple tree is also shade and pollination and animal food and windbreaks and wood and a place to sit down, a place to read a book, and all of these different things. the yield can be as many things as you can think of, which brings me to another one, which is creativity is the biggest limit to abundance. If you can't imagine an apple tree giving you more than apples, it's only going to give you apples. So we go with this mindset into the world that if we can't all imagine that we can all get together and just trade hundreds and hundreds of varieties of seeds and everyone's having a wonderful time and enjoying it, we wouldn't be doing this. But because someone in a group of people have gone through the work to imagine this stuff happening and creating that surplus for the community, we get to have events like today, which are, in my opinion, absolutely wonderful looking at all this. So we move through these principles and guidelines, and it helps us do things on our landscape, in our gardens, in our communities, which increase the diversity. This diversity comes in many forms. It could be the diversity in mindsets and conversations. It could be the diversity in species of tomatoes and the diversity in number of insects and birds and so on and so on. The amount of varieties of life that live in your gardens and on your farms and in your landscape. It might start off very small, like it did at our farm when we first started, but now there's hundreds and hundreds of different animals and insects and flowers and bugs and plants growing there that are all interacting with each other and giving surplus to other things that are taking the surplus from other things that are giving it back to something else, and it's starting to connect and move through the landscape to where it starts creating yields that are actually really tangible and beneficial, like holding water into the landscape well into the summer. We can now dry farm all kinds of things: tomatoes, melons, squash, beans, corn, without any irrigation at all, because we're able to capture and store that water from the winter. One of the other principles is capture and store energy. So we're capturing and storing the sun's energy in different forms so that we can build and create life. And the more and more of these things we can start to do with the mindsets of the way of permaculture, you can start to create much more diversity, new varieties of fruits. What happens if someone went out here and grabbed 2 kinds of melons because they didn't know, and they went home and planted them, and they got 2 kinds of melons, but then they saved the seeds from one of them and planted them the next year, and it became a new kind of melon. Well, now we have a new kind of melon in the world, and if each of us accidentally did that, in this room right now there'd be 100 or more new varieties of fruits and vegetables. If someone did it on purpose, there could be even more. Because of those new traits into the world, they're adapting to the new climate changes and the soil conditions and the weather systems that are coming in, and the needs of people and the diets of new cultures and food trends and hats and things like that. And all of this leads towards just more diversity. And permaculture is basically a system in which we want to just create more life. So we're constantly just creating as much life as we can. And in some ways that's the basis of what permaculture is. It's an ethics-based design science in which we're using guidance from nature to create more life. And that's pretty much what we got going on. So if anyone has any questions, does anyone have any questions? I'm sorry. Okay, well then I'll just keep talking. So, in our garden and farm, we're using permaculture to grow tons of food for the community, and we're selling in multiple markets. We have an education course coming up this year to talk about how to create water retention landscapes and learn how to grow nutrient-dense foods and all the wonderful things that permaculture entails. We're in Sonora, California, and we do tours all the time, so if you're ever in Sonora and want to find out and check out what we have going on, please let us know and contact us, and we'll give you a tour around to see what's possible. There's many wonderful things you can do in the foothills here. We have a wonderful climate, and you can really do some amazing things.
I would need to talk to somebody about where we bought 2 acres out in the Grange
Can you speak into there and ask the question?
We bought 2 acres out in the Grange area, and the problem with that is, like right now, I could pick 4 things close to plant something deep. Other than that, it's going to be hot. There's rocks in there, and there's ice, and people with boulders. If somebody wants 3 boulders, I'll found
Mm-hmm.
Or in the summer, it's so hot. It gets up to 106 and 108. And we live on the hill, so the sun is relentless. It starts at like 11 o'clock and 6, and it's just, it burns everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to figure out what I can grow there and how I can grow it. So I don't have to pay a bunch of fees for the water company
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have wells out there, just septic. And that's been a problem. And my daughter will grow stuff and she can't grow it there because it's not enough sun.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll bring it to me and it does okay for a certain amount of time. And then when the middle of the summer hits, it just breaks out.
Mm-hmm. So there is no such thing as bad soil on this planet. There's just soil that has things that it doesn't. There's soil that doesn't have things that it needs. And there's only 4 things that a soil needs to be any soil on the planet to become a healthy soil. And that is water, carbon, biology, and minerals. So when we first came to the farm, or when I first came to the farm, they were gardening on a larger scale and rototilling and doing their general practices. And I could probably go into the ground maybe that far. And through the years and practices of no-till and cover cropping and compost and rotational grazing of animals and all these different things, I can now take a piece of rebar this big and just push it into the ground by hand. So now I have soil that's 4 feet deep of just rich black soil, which can hold water for a very long time. But my soil it didn't have carbon, the water wasn't going into it, it didn't have any biology, and it didn't have any minerals. So for me, it was just crappy, hard dirt. It wasn't even soil. Okay. As far as the tomatoes and the vegetables giving out more in the summer, in my opinion, that's more because the soil is getting too hot. It gets to be 106 and 110 at our farm too, but my soil stays cooler. I feel that it's not as much of an air temperature problem, it's more of a root temperature problem. When the soil gets too hot in the summer because it's just getting baked by the sun, the soil temperature goes up, the biology starts changing, and the nutrient uptake between the biology and the plants starts changing as well. As an example, cilantro is quite a common crop that you can't really grow in the summer because it's too hot. It turns out if you plant cilantro starts into mulched ground, they do just fine because the soil temperature is cool under a couple inches of mulch. And we've done trials where it's mulched and not mulched, and the ones that were mulched, we got 4, 5, 6 harvests off of it, and the one that wasn't mulched, we got about that tall and then it bolted. So soil temperature is really important, so that's adding organic matter to your soil in the form of mulch. So now we're talking about different ways to build soil, and there's really only 2 ways to build soil. One is to build soil up by adding on top, and one is to build soil down by using life. So every time a plant sends down roots into the ground and it dies, all those little bits of organic matter decompose and become threads of compost going into the soil. Some species, as an example like amaranth, which I know is on the table, I've seen it out there, will grow 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 feet tall sometimes. But its roots will also go 4, 5, 6, 7 feet into the ground, creating these nice channels of open pathways of carbon and nitrogen and water and everything in biology as those roots decompose. Through that, you can start to build soil up by adding mulch and compost and things like that, and building it down by roots and biology and worms and things like that. And you can turn really hard soil into something amazing in a very short period of time, within 1 to 2 years. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. It depends on what you're trying to grow and on what scale. So, Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So the famous answer in permaculture is it depends. How much water do you have? Where are you at? Yeah, so it's just more based on context. So there's so many different ways. We like to say permaculture is like creating a painting on your landscape. And every single person in this room is going to create a different painting. So in some ways you need to use different brush strokes and techniques and methods that would lead towards the painting that you're looking for, instead of what she's looking for, what he's looking for, or what she's looking for. And we do that by exchanging knowledge and information and seeds and techniques and methods as our return of surplus to each other, so that we can all get closer and closer to creating the painting that we're actually trying to create on our landscapes and our gardens.
Would you offer permaculture design consults, or do you like yeah?
So we have a sign-up sheet over here next to the strawberries. That's our email list. We do classes. We're going to start doing classes next month, and we're going to try and do 2 or 3 a month for the rest of the year, so that everyone can gain education in many different topics: propagation, chickens, composting, field work, trees, pasture, all kinds of things like that. And yes, we do consulting, so sign up for the email list, give us your number and such, and we can always work things out. So, yeah.
We have time for one more
Yes.
question for Jordan, and then any other questions you can ask at our Q&A.
Yeah. And there's free strawberries over there as well, so go for it. So, one more. Who's?
You mentioned that amaranth is good for penetrating and protein.
Can you put it a little? Say that again, please.
You mentioned that amaranth is good at penetrating heavy clay soils.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other species that are good at that, especially like native species?
Yes. Well, so a lot of the species that are good at breaking up and repairing soil are what we would generally call invasive species. They are there as repair mechanisms to the landscape. So a lot of the times native species don't, it's not that they don't want to grow, the conditions in which for them to grow are not there. So as an example, when I came to the farm, I ended up there because the landowner, Craig, we had a conversation at an event like this, and he's like, what do you want to do? And I want to garden. And he said, I don't have land. He's like, well, I got this spot in the corner. The star thistle is 7 foot. It's the worst piece of ground on the farm. You can have it and do whatever you want. So I go in there and we put a little bit of terracing in, and we put the amaranth, and we did things like that. And within 1 year, there was more than 200 species of plants growing in that area. I had grains and flowers and herbs and veggies and trees and berries, and I started to become more productive on that one piece of land than they did in the rest of the farm. And it's because we use those pioneer species. As time goes on, those pioneer species build better soil. Because the soil gets better, the conditions in which they need to repair the soil go away. So they start to disappear. And new species come in that are, let's call it next tier of succession. As those species do the same thing and the next succession becomes the same thing, you start to get more of a return of native species, because they're used to growing in soil like we had before we came and messed up this land, which was rich in soil carbon and rich in biology and rich in water. It was rich in diversity and life. So we can use these species to get us to the point where they start going away themselves and they start introducing to the next species. So like the area that was all foxtails or star thistle when I came, and foxtails and things like that, there's none of those species anymore. There's nothing but perennial bunching grasses and blue stem rye and all kinds of grasses that are more akin to what this landscape actually wants. But we had to build back the carbon, we had to build back the minerals, we had to build back the biology so that those species could succession in and eventually get rid of the nasty pioneer invasive species. So in some ways we can use those plants. We have a joking saying that in permaculture we only use native plants, plants native to planet Earth, because all plants come from this planet, and they only grow where they want to grow. And if you create the conditions for something to grow, it will grow. Whether it's conditions that are bad, like destroyed soil, overgrazed soil, overtilled soil, low organic matter soil, compacted soil, you'll get species that love compaction and low fertility and overgrazing and so on. As we use permaculture to build soil and make healthier ecosystems, we get to the point where there's more life and diversity, but on the spectrum of things that we actually truly want and need, instead of the things that we don't. So.
Hello. It's nice to be in a room with a lot of people who share a passion about the earth and what we put in it. So, some of you know me, some of you don't. I had the privilege of growing up on a very big piece of land over in Amador County. There was a farm with cows and sheep and goats, chickens, turkeys, big gardens that my nana would tend, and I grew up that way. I was a student over at Amador County High back in the 1960s and read a book that just was published called Silent Spring. I read that in probably 1966. It connected the dots for me and set me on a course of my life to really always focus on organic farming. But it wasn't until I was probably 36 or 37 years old, shopping at the Sacramento Natural Foods Co-op down in Sacramento, and I came across a garden called Raphael's Garden over in Fair Oaks. And I went and I met Harold Haven, who was a young German about my age, but he had studied in Europe and had been taught biodynamic farming. And the farm was on the Rudolf Steiner College over in Fair Oaks. Something resonated in a deep way. And I want to tell you a little bit about biodynamics. It's pretty misunderstood. You're hearing it more and more. This year, this June, it's been 100 years since Rudolf Steiner, a philosopher, the person who created Waldorf education, Weleda Cosmetics. He was one of those thinkers of the early part of our previous century. And he saw clearly that the world was changing. The whole chemical farming that Justin so eloquently understands and talked about to you was not what they were talking about in the 1860s and 1870s. Justin von Lippert, he's the father of organic chemistry, a young genius born in 1803, wrote a book in 1840 that became a bestseller calling for the use of more of these new chemicals to be put into fertilizers. He was the one who invented urea, the first synthetic organic compound. At the turn of this century in 1908, Haber and Bosch synthesized out of thin air ammonia. And now for the first time, nitrogen was being put in the ground in a synthetic form more than ever. Farmers who were intellectuals and followers of Rudolf Steiner's thinking started noticing in the 19-teens that their crops were not doing as well. They couldn't grow the same plants in the same soil. And they begged him for his take. And a conference was held in Kubrowitz, Poland, and it went on for 10 days, and Rudolf Steiner spoke each day for about an hour and a half, and then took questions. And he basically said, we should only put in our ground as fertilizers things made from living things, plants and animals. Nothing else. And he turned his back to this emerging world of chemicals and said, This is going to diminish our intuitive knowledge and sicken us as people. He wrote about bees as well, and right practically 90 years from the time he had a discussion with a beekeeper at that time, predicted what was going on with bees when we started artificially inseminating them. So biodynamics began to grow out of that. Rudolf Steiner died 10 months after he gave the lectures. The young farmers who were there and doctors started experimenting with these ideas that he presented. And in 1928, tested enough that they formed the Biodynamic Association, the first organization on the planet that would certify a farm was not using anything that was synthetic. And the whole aspiration is to make the farm feed itself. And also to pay attention that we're not alone, we're in a cosmos. And just like yesterday, it was the full moon. The day before was the day before the full moon on Friday. I planted close to 500 tomato, pepper, and eggplant seeds to catch that rhythm of the emerging full moon. And yesterday, Saturn and the moon were opposite each other with Earth in the middle. These are the things that we can think about when we start thinking of ourselves as part of the cosmos. And he gave us certain plants that we could use. And he said, let's just make good compost, and we need to apply this everywhere. And there's no cost. So here's a little bit of information you may know or not know. This is a cow that died 2 years ago. I knew this cow. And I had a group of students coming from a high school in the county to my farm. So I went back out in the field and took the skull to bring to my farm. But when the cow died, about a week after the cow died, I tapped off and pulled off the cap. So, how many people know what the horn really is? It's the extension of the sinus. Every breath a cow takes, every breath in her life goes up into her nose and into her horns and back down into her lungs. And this bovine, that's a digesting machine, is breathing, and all her air is going in her horns. We live in a society that takes the horns off the cows because we farm them in ways that are too dangerous for themselves, crowded conditions. And we treat them as a commodity. The cow's horns are her expression. I've seen cows, and some of you, scratch each other's backs with their horns. So Steiner said, look, when you slaughter your cow, because you're going to eat her, or she dies, take off her caps. And in the fall, get the manure from a cow that's lactating, that's nursing. Stuff it into the horn. Think of this as a vessel to make sourdough. If you were making sourdough in a crock that had there's always a lot of energy around. Oh. I will. Yeah, just stick it in the thing because I'm going to use my hands. do. So he says to take the manure from a cow that's lactating. So I go out in the fall and I kind of watching the herd, you know, and looking, and then I see a gift. I take my bucket, scoop that up, and then we stuff it into the horn. I bury that into the ground about anywhere from 18 inches to 2 feet deep. And I'm not just doing one horn, I'm doing several. And I do it in the fall because biodynamics is about gestures also. The more we look at the world we live in, like right now the moon is descending, and it'll do that for another 13 days. And then it appears to be rising, ascending, because the moon doesn't go around its level, it's on a 5-degree angle. And these rhythms affect sap. They affect when you work with your roots. So in the fall, we think of the fall and winter as the big in-breath for Earth, and then spring and summer, an out-breath gesture. So in the late afternoon, again, a downward feeling, morning, upward. So in the late afternoon, as fall begins, we stuff the horn, we bury it in the ground, and we leave it there all winter, and we dig it up in late spring. And all those downward forces are coming into the ground, and this horn that was on her head, she's a digesting machine. So this horn is really the same material as our fingernails. And it's absorbed all her breaths, the compounds of digestion. This is a jump start to make compost in. So it sits in the ground so it doesn't freeze, it doesn't get too hot, and then in the spring we dig it up, and it's sweet smelling, full of all sorts of little bacterias and mycelium. Now we have a charged, beautiful concentration of a compost. And we take it and we hide it into a cave or someplace dark where it's going to stay nice and cool. And we don't use it until the next winter and spring. Whenever we turn the soil, we'll take, get this, 1 handful to 3 gallons. I can do an acre just by sprinkling it out. I've seen my soil change. And Steiner said, we must embrace some of the tools. And he talked about the tractor and the dangers of tractors because of the use of fuels and such. But right now, in this world, I am actually going to be experimenting this spring using a drone to spray my vineyards so I don't have to go out in the vineyards. And I'm going to spray them with a tea that I make with Equisidium, horsetail, really high in silica. And I can treat with 3 gallons of tea made out of about a cup of this chopped up. I'm treating vineyards, I can do 2.5 acres. I put that 3 gallons and 100 gallons of water on an air blast tractor, and I actually have kept mildew out of my vineyards without using sulfur for 4 years. I dry farm as well. So a drone, I don't even have to drive the tractor through the vineyard. I can spray it from above. It's kind of interesting how, people think that a biodynamic farmer would embrace a drone, but I think I just did. So biodynamics uses several different plants. We use yarrow. Yarrow is antifungal. We use dandelion. Dandelion is a weed to most people, but it's a good tea. Think of the lion. We use valerian. Valerian is a plant that has often been used in in herbal history for its roots, we use the flowers, and the flower is full of phosphorus. So I can make a tea out of valerian flowers in the spring just by taking the flowers and putting them in water and in a sunny window. And then after about a week, strain that. That is so potent, you have to be careful. Its uses too, you can use it when there's going to be a frost, and you can take a very dilute solution and put it into water and spray your plants and protect them. And you can add it to the compost for heat. Probably the most important plant in my repertoire that he felt was so strong was stinging nettles. And so stinging nettles, just to make a tea out of it for yourself, it's full of iron, sulfur compounds. If you give the same tea to your plants, they love it, they thrive. You can ferment it and make a stinky solution that eventually smells good, and it's a root tonic. So biodynamics is a farming method that says use plants to treat plants, make compost, enrich that compost using these plants, and do no harm. It's so simple, and it's so much knowledge is out there about it now. If it is something you want to explore, then this is the year, because we're celebrating 100 years since he gave those interesting lectures. It's all there. It's easier to talk about if you have a question for me, but I've been using it on my little farm since 2011, when I kind of founded my farm. And it just grows richer and richer, and it takes you down that rabbit hole of learning. You become an alchemist, because you don't go anywhere to buy things. You just make it yourself. There's a weed out in my tomato patch right now that's the scariest thistle that I've ever seen. And I'm going to try to have a companion help me. And we're going to take it out of the ground and wash it. And I'm just going to chop it all up and put it in a barrel of water with a handful of compost. And I'm going to ferment it. And then after it's finished stinking, and I will have all those minerals put back in the soil. So that's another kind of thing. You become a little bit crazy. I sleep outside once June arrives, and I don't go in until the rains drive me in. It's an amazing journey. So anyway, if you want to know about biodynamics, come and visit my little farm, or go to my website, and there's links on there where you can find anything you really want. All right, that's it. Any questions?
Can you give us the name of your farm, your website, and the group again, please?
So it's abbondanza. It means abundance in Italian. Abundance of work, love, energy. So ABBONDANZAFARMS.com. And I actually have an Instagram thing too, Abbondanza Farms. There you go. Yes.
Thank you for your time and your knowledge. It's all beautiful. Biodynamics can also be like a very technical thing, because it's just many layers of systems and systems and systems that you have to become more aware of. To get started with having awareness with an important system, do you recommend starting with the moon, or is there a preferred fun, getting started system of the entire series of systems?
So, yeah, it always seems so complex anytime, but it's like going into an art gallery. The more you know, the more you start seeing. And so there are some wonderful books. on biodynamics. It would be easier if you and I could connect and I could show you that. But one is just called biodynamics. The other, go to my website and just click in, because I have a history of biodynamics, and click and I give you links, and then you can communicate. Communicate with me, because the next time I dig up a horn, or if I'm stirring something, that's really the best way. Come and do hands-on. Try something. Start growing nettles. Fall in love with nettles. I have 6th grade kids come visit my farm, line up to get stung, and drink nettle tea. And I have high school kids that are a little nervous about, showing any like of doing something. Same thing. So I think it's just, you could get in there and never ever think that you have to buy anything to grow anything ever again. Yeah. And I found out later in my life that Rachel Carson's, one of the big hunks of her book, she talks about a farm. There were two 19-year-old girls who were students of Rudolf Steiner, and they were Americans. And they came back to New York, and they started a farm on Long Island in the 1930s. And in 1957, when our crazy agrochemical industrial society was at its big point, there was a gypsy moth problem in New York, and they paid pilots, crop dusters, by the gallon, not the acreage, to spray DDT. And they actually mixed it with jet fuel and sprayed these women's farms, and they sued. It's a big case. And that was part of the backbones of Rachel Carson's book. And they were biodynamic. They spent 20 years farming biodynamically and then had the whole thing sprayed with DDT. Our world is using, that got banned because of her book, but Roundup is still ubiquitous out in the Shenandoah Valley. On our roadsides, it's tough. It's really tough to talk to somebody my age who's farming and going, how can you do that? How can you put a poison in the ground? Nobody should do that anymore. We all have enough knowledge, particularly if you're a CEO that owns so much that you can build all these wineries and vineyards, and you still do that? It's a disconnect, and it's scary to me. I don't know, folks. It's scary. We live in a disconnected world, but if you just want to practice something really good, biodynamics is the heart and soul of the whole, everything we got. Yeah.
First of all, thank you. I look forward to taking you up on the opportunity of coming to see you spot. I actually just wanted to add for your question. I found it super accessible and still in October calendar. Just starting with the activities you do in your garden and planting seeds kind of works with that cycle is a beautiful, accessible first.
Yeah, thank you. The Stella Natura calendar is a great tool. Any other questions? Yeah.
So I recently heard about Jerusalem artichokes and how it's the important food source back in the day, and I also was told that it's like a plant and forget crop. Can we grow Jerusalem artichokes in this area, in Gold Country?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's people in this room that grow them all the time and eat them. Absolutely. Go up and just ask somebody, have you grown Jerusalem artichoke? And I'll bet you by the fifth person, there's one right there. Anybody else? There's one right here. There's one way back there. And they're beautiful. They look like some little sunflowers too. They like a nice warm wall, at least where I was growing them. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yes. It's just like my equisetum. I like to do this when I have kids out. So this is a crystal, pure silica, quartz. Equisetum's roots search out quartz in the ground and dissolve it. Pull the dissolved silica up, and in the morning, before the sun comes up, the tips of all of them have, it looks like a jewel of dew. It's not. It's the silica, and it coats its body with it. The Germans call it pewter polish. It's so abrasive. It's the oldest plant on earth. It was here before the deciduous trees. And it's just an amazing mover of water, and because of the silica, I chop it up, put it in boiling water, and just let it sit all day. And then the next day is when it goes into the tank to spray the grapes. And it tightens the little stomata. It makes the surface something a mold doesn't want anything to do with, and sends it back to the ground. It's not killing it, it's just making it an inhospitable, undesirable place to be. And how simple. And yet, in my neighborhood, somebody is spraying sulfur every 11 days to do that. I do it once. I might do it twice, but in that batch, I mix in some kelp. That's one thing I do buy. I love kelp. And some of you remember reading the book Finhorn a long time ago about a garden in Scotland. And their magic, they were biodynamic farmers, but they composted seaweed. And their plants grew like colossal because seaweed's got cycloquinins in them which make things grow. And it also helps with sun protection. So it's really good for the vineyard in the summer. So I get distracted, but anyway. There's so many uses. And the yarrow also, besides being something that'll help bleeding, it'll help against fungal issues as well. And so water for bees, I would make tea with yarrow and chamomile, some nettles, everybody gets nettles, and I would mix that into the water, maybe some little bit of pink salt too, never know. So like I say, it takes you, and you just keep running into people and learning. That's really what it's about. All right, if no one has another, gray water. So I live in the house that I grew up in. My daddy built it in finished it in 55. I unhooked the kitchen sink, and that drains out into the front, which is pretty much a flower garden oasis, a lot of this stuff. And that's where that gray water goes, and the washing machine goes out into the field where I have just a lot of shrubs and roses and stuff. That's the only way I use any gray water on my property. And that's another thing about biodynamic. The concept of biodynamic is every farm is unique, and you address it. That's kind of the permacultural connection in the modern age. Permaculture has really kind of got brought out into the world through the 1980s forward. There's hugelkultur. There's all these different knowledges that people are talking about. But in biodynamics, it's just mainly don't do any harm. Don't use anything synthetic. Make your own, and here are some really wonderful plants. And the door is always open to experiment. Steiner never lived in America. He didn't know some of the plants we had here. And the Native Americans did teas. And so we're always exploring, but kind of the cardinal rule is you should be growing it. Don't go buy things. So I do go buy kelp.
So, sir, I think he asked if it was you can make your tea with rainwater.
Oh, make my tea
with rainwater.
Rainwater. So, yeah, rainwater is traditionally used. We all know that who knows what's coming down now in the rain, but I use rainwater as much as I can to make teas out of. I have a good well. I'm out in the country. It's really deep, and my water is quite good, so I don't mind using my water. Something else we do, though, in biodynamics, whenever we're making a tea, thank you for bringing that up, we stir it. And some of our stirrings are just for 20 minutes, and others are for 1 hour. And this is in spirals, and then you lift up, and then reverse it. So you're creating order, and you're creating chaos. But at the same thing, every time you reverse it, you're putting all these tiny bubbles. And the bubbles are carrying air. They're oxygenizing it. Steiner felt that the God force that creates everything is in oxygen. And so when you're creating these bubbles, you're enlivening the whole tea. So rainwater, groundwater, you can have things called flow forms, which are beautifully created waterfalls that gets the water spinning into spirals like it does in a river. And so those are, the more we talk about biodynamics, I mean, this is a subject that's more than 20 minutes long. It just leads you into other. A great book for you to get would be Grass the Levels by Peter Proctor. So he died a few years ago, but it's a really sweet, and he lays everything out and explains. That's one thing that everybody wants to share. And then, there you go.
Did you ever think about writing your own recipe book for your teas? Or?
They're really not mine. Although, you know, some are, because I do put a pinch of this in, a pinch of that, and there's some favorite soil up on the hill. Yep, my chicken's eggs get ground into powder. But I would rather people create their own. I'm not interested in writing a book about that. Yeah, it becomes a mindset. All right, thank you so much for hanging out.
To become part of our immediate lives and turning that more into a garden and a food forest.
Feel good about it.
And growing orchards. So please come up to the front so you can actually hear what Hawk has to say. Thank you.
You're amazing.
Yep.
Thank you.
Go for it. Yep.
Ooh-wee. All right. First of all, bear with me as I learn how to learn in public about how to use these things. I appreciate Sam's introduction. You know, I'm still learning even myself how to articulate and kind of distill the things I've been learning. And in that way, I just want to introduce myself as a brief history of being raised in actual orchards in Southern California with citrus and avocado industry down there with my grandfather and my father, tending trees my great-grandfather planted down there. And then left that into more actually biodynamics. If anybody's familiar with the Biggest Little Farm documentary, that's about 5 minutes from where I grew up, so I helped them with pasture management for about a year or so, and then really wanted to bridge the accessibility of farming, homesteading and things with people that maybe aren't connected with millions of dollars and such. So I kind of went on an endeavor for a nonprofit up on the Klamath River, managing 200 acres of irrigated pasture and 1,800 acres of forest, which got me into more livestock management, and then its connection to the forest land. So yeah, I started learning more tree work and forestry. And then kind of a meander to find myself here at the old Catholic worker farm up at the end of Armstrong Road, where it really feels like a canvas to bring all these pieces together. I really want to appreciate Jordan for holding that. I really appreciate when people have the capacity to articulate and orient people to the breadth of what permaculture is. And I think what I'd like to start with is really an acknowledgement for a second, because on that journey I just named of my life, I kept coming to the realization that even when we're talking about permaculture and those principles, we have to recognize that even that designer's manual that Bill Mollison made, if anybody's familiar with that, or the concept of permaculture, was all founded on indigenous people's wisdom. And so from all over the world, and I just want to acknowledge that, because even the principles of observation require a dedication to place, which we have to acknowledge all of our ancestors had for generations and thousands of years, and the ancestors of these lands that we're on now, you know. And so even everything I've learned are truly just echoes of the original people throughout California, and I definitely want to put a plug in for a book called Tending the Wild, and just that really bolstered my connection to really permaculture wisdom through indigenous peoples. And so I named this talk kind of intuitively Forests as Orchards, because you know, I've just noticed myself growing up literally growing orchards, and then getting into forestry, and then learning about how indigenous people really oriented to a lot of these spaces we see as oak savannas and oak evergreen woodlands into the high country, were immensely impacted by human relationship for thousands of years. I really think it's a very poignant, I'm going to paraphrase it in Tending the Wild, that they said a lot of the original settlers that came over here for the gold rush didn't realize that the literal ecologies that they walked into were artifacts of cultural relationship for thousands of years. You know, Yosemite, you could see wall to wall, and water flowed year round because all the pine encroachment was managed by those people with fire, and not to mention the deer migrations and the elk herds managing things beyond, I think, our comprehension. So I'm naming all those things because now we don't really have those herds, and fire is a very sensitive subject, as I am well discovering at this point in my journey with it. Because those ecologies are so massively changed, and we do have to have more consideration around the safe use of that tool. But I'm naming all these things, and I hope you can follow my way of speaking. It kind of works like water, so if you follow me, I promise we'll arrive somewhere that probably feels like the ocean together. I think what I really wanted to share today is in that fashion of reculturing ourselves, of how we look at what we currently understand as forests, and in particular be able to start understanding the nuances of, again, from the valley plains and the massive valley oaks that used to be there, and oak savannas, into the woodlands and mixed evergreens. And really just that as a concept is pretty revolutionary in my personal experience. And I've been really inspired also, again, in addressing the impacts of colonization and the removal of indigenous management. We have all these dense forests, as we well know, that create profound impacts on fire ecology and water ecology, you know, like, and the removal of beavers particularly as well. Like, all these things are impacting. I remember a native person was saying we don't actually have a drought problem. And you see that, as a matter of fact, Cedar Springs Preserve, in my opinion, is a profound example where the Butte Fire came through there and wiped out the pine and cedar density there, and then the springs started flowing again. And that was a place called Cedar Springs for a reason, right? And so it's amazing to see when that forest is managed, maybe catastrophically or proactively, what we could do to actually help our waters flow year round. And then obviously that impacts directly the fire ecology and safety for our communities in that fashion. And the last thing I'll plug into that I've really been inspired by in my work in fuels reduction for the last 10 years is that all the materials we need for building sustainably is right there waiting for us to
mutually tend that ecology and those impacts and have those impacts on our communities and provide profoundly abundant resources of timber particularly. And I can maybe come back next year and share about some of the beautiful things that are bubbling up in my world around that, as far as some pilot projects about that. I guess on that note, you know, I'm going to keep it brief because I know we wanted to, there's still one more section with the speakers. But as far as seeds, what inspired this thought in me actually around the seed exchange is again when we start changing our concept of forest health and composition of our forest, particularly with oak trees and walnuts and all these amazing things. Actually, that's a perfect segue, is that when you walk into an oak savanna in these foothills, or even in the woodlands where I'm at up at the end of Armstrong, you'll see these huge black oaks, manzanita, and a bunch of other species of ceanothus, medicine plants, and things like that. So coming back to the permaculture ideals of people maybe have heard of food forests, it's like, again, what those settlers came into was a profoundly curated food forest and then you had sugar pines coming out of the overstory of these massive oaks, and you have sugar pine nuts, gray pine nuts, and black oaks, blue oaks, and manzanita. You have your fruit nut guild right there, you know, that nobody's really doing much other than maybe a little bit of management every 2 to 5 years with fire or animals. So just want to really inspire us to really think of the implications of that, and particularly empower that indigenous wisdom of the First Peoples that I think we're barely starting to understand. And I think I'm going to pause there. I think that's kind of a good wrap of what my work is and what I'm inspired by, and stoked to have conversations about how to bridge. Also, I really appreciate folks in the permaculture world of really addressing this ideologies around invasive species, and I really appreciate people being able to articulate the indicators they are. You know, we have a 9-acre meadow of star thistle that I'm actually really excited to see what that plant has to teach us there, you know. So with all that, you know, how these things bridge when we have access to fruit trees and all these other beautiful plants and seeds from around the world, and in that way, I'm going to come full circle to one of our greatest, my greatest teachers, Martin Prechtel. You know, been very inspiring in my life to learn the old cultural stories. All these seeds on these tables have ancestral people that have stories in relationship to them. So I want to honor that. Just like those oak trees and sugar pines of the native peoples here, all these seeds have ancestral roots as well. And I think it would really behoove us to, again, address our ancestral lines and the ancestral lines of these seeds. Because in that way, I want to just honor everybody here for participating in what I'm feeling, and Sam particularly, thank you, and all the people in the past few years that have organized to be. This event is a seed of culture. And of course, then conflict arises, and how do we deal with that, you know? And so I just want to honor the people everyone, even the people just showing up to be inspired for a day about this, because in my opinion, when our grocery stores and things like that might not fully support us into the future, this community is actually going to be the most important thing in our lives.
Beans and spinach greens and rabbits getting fatter all the time. Oh, we got a little garden in our backyard.